The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Man, oh man, I feel just fine. Voice is still a little bit screwball, but it's starting to get better. I can feel there was a moment this morning. This is like podcasting 101 and what not to do at the beginning of a show. There was a moment this morning where, and you could hear my voice do a little funny thing just then, where I was reading I Know a Rhino to my 2-year-old before the nanny arrived, and I could feel this like in my throat. There was this one big one, and it just popped, and suddenly I could speak again, and the world was right. So I'm going to do my best. There's still going to be some pauses here to take drinks of water because I got to get this laryngitis away. And I have so many podcasts that I'm doing at the early part of this week that I don't want them to sound terrible. So anyway, we're rolling along. It's Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris, your gracious host. Really excited about today's guest. Anthony Irwin of Locked On Lakers is going to be joining us in about 20 minutes or so. And we'll get the deep dive on what the heck is going on with Rajon Rondo's hand, the battle at shooting guard in L.A., Lonzo Ball's development. The funny thing is, I have no questions for Anthony about LeBron James. We're going to be the only podcast that has a Lakers expert on and doesn't mention the King. That's my goal for today. That's my goal. We're going to be weird that way. At Dan Besbris on Twitter, if you'd like to give me a follow, if you want to holler my way, I would suggest you do, because the one thing I want to mention before we get into any fantasy stuff on today's podcast is that it's mid-December, which means we've finally, here at Hoop Ball, kind of caught up with all of the stuff that gets pushed to the back burner when the regular season ramp-up begins. So yes, I'm saying things that we wanted to get done in September are finally done. Not kidding. 3 months late, but we got them done, which means it's time now at Hoop Ball for expansion. This is that time of year, right around the holidays. This is when we generally make a push in this regard, and we're looking for more writers and podcasters. And we now finally have the time to actually look at recruits. So if you're out there, and there are multiple thousands of you, I know, that listen to this podcast. I try not to talk about numbers too much, but I know there's a decent chunk of you that are out there that listen to this show. If you think you can do it, if you want to give it a try, let me know. And the best way to let me know is just to holler at me on Twitter, at Dan Besbris. If you don't have a Twitter account, just make one. Send me a note. I can get you my email address that way, and then you can even end your Twitter. You can sign off at the end of the day. I don't care. The whole thing will take you like 2 minutes. They make it really easy to sign up for these things because they want as many people on these platforms as possible. So get on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. Send me a note. I'm going to tell you right now, it's a lot of work. Okay? It's not to just come in and, write a one-page article every month or whatever you want to do. There's legitimate work involved in this. There's blurbing shifts where you have multiple hours in a row, where your job is to watch hundreds of different accounts on Twitter for all the NBA teams and make sure that you've got the most up-to-date information and beat reporters and whoever's coming out with stuff, and you get that from those sources, and we aggregate it. That's how blurb feeds work at Hoop Ball, Roto World, Fantasy Labs, I think, has one. I think those are the ones that have the most notable blurb. Anyway, it doesn't matter who does blurb feeds, but we have one. That's the point. And the way that we get all that information is by following a crap load of people. That's a medical term, a crap load. It's part of the metric system. So there's blurb shifts, there's articles, grammar has to be great, knowledge of the game has to be good, knowledge of fantasy has to be superlative. And if all of those things is true, then you got yourself a spot. So let me know if you're interested. We're recruiting right now. I sent out a tweet last night about it, and a handful of you have already replied, and we're going to get that application process started. And for the rest of you, likewise, send me a note. I lied. I did 2 things I wanted to cover before we get into fantasy. The other one is our DFS contest tomorrow. Beat the Expert with Micah Patria is on DraftKings. We already, as the time of this recording, have 16 spots filled up, which is pretty early, actually, to have 16 spots filled up. I'm excited about that. And I'm more excited about the fact that there are 100 spots in the contest this week. That's right, it's double the size. We went up from 50 to 100. I don't know, legitimately, if we're going to fill the 100 seats this week. The more the merrier, obviously. The prize pool is excellent. The top 10 spots pay $30 a piece. Top 10 gets $30 a piece. The number 1 seed also gets a Hoop Ball t-shirt. And the number 2 seed also gets a goodie bag from our partners at Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, the title sponsor of all of our podcasts here at Hoop Ball. Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee Company, a roaster of fine Kona coffee blends made in Hawaii and spreading aloha. That's straight out of their Twitter bio. They are awesome. They are our partners in crime. Check them out, hawaiianisles.com, or search for Hawaiian Isles on Amazon. You can get your coffee there. And I've seen the tweets. I've seen the notes from our staff as well. Between our followers and our staff, a lot of new Hawaiian Isles drinkers. You should join them. You'll be happy you did. Before we get to Anthony, and I want to get there as soon as possible because he's awesome, and I love having people on this show that also do podcasts because I know that life is going to be really easy. I know that they're going to have really good equipment, which is also fun. And he and I had some funny conversations off air that I can't go through the details of. Just suffice it to say that we agree on a lot of things related to NBA Twitter. It's a silly place out there. But before we get into that stuff, I want to get into yesterday's games. Number 1, recapping the gambling stuff. Remember on yesterday's podcast, I talked about how there were like 5 revenge angles on the card yesterday. Well, I missed one that I noticed later in the day. Phoenix, New York was not your typical revenge angle yesterday. But if you recall, Enes Kanter trolled Devin Booker after the Knicks beat the Suns last season, and Phoenix had revenge on the brain. So yesterday's revenge games, Detroit +4 covered by 1 point. That was a narrow one, but we got there. Phoenix won outright by a boatload, so they covered in their revenge angle. Minnesota beat Sacramento by 27. That was an easy cover. Oklahoma City covered their 12.5 as a revenge game against Chicago. And the only one that really was Houston pushed. 102-97 final score. That was a double revenge game, and they pushed a 5-point spread. Memphis Golden State, I actually had pretty high hopes for that one, and then Mike Conley was a late scratch, and it went down the toilet. Problem is there, when the late scratch comes on the opposing team, I usually try to middle that wager. Like if, let's say that Kevin Durant was a late scratch. Hypothetically, Kevin Durant was out. That line likely would have moved from Grizzlies +11, which is where it was sitting for most of the day, to Grizzlies +8 or +8.5, something like that. And you could have middled that, meaning then you bet on the Warriors -8. And if the game hits on 8, 9, 10, or 11, you either win one or win both and push on the other one. And if it hits the 2 middle numbers there, then you actually win both of the bets. And the worst case scenario is you lose the juice on one of your 2 wagers, and they sort of cancel each other out. Problem in this one was the late scratch was on the team we had already wagered on, and so the line actually went up from Memphis +11 to Memphis +13. You don't want to bet off of a game in that spot, meaning if you had bet Warriors -13 at that point, yes, as it turned out, that would have actually canceled your wagers because the Warriors won the game by 17. But if 12 was the final mark, you would have lost both. That's not a position you want to put yourself in ever. So unfortunately, in this regard, because we bet this game early, we sort of got screwed. And that's the way it goes sometimes. Sometimes you bet it early and you end up with a middling opportunity. Sometimes you bet it early and you get the better line. Sometimes you bet it early and you get dinged. And that's what happened in this one. So unfortunately, that one went down the tubes. But otherwise, the revenge angles were magnifique. And we'll keep tracking those on the sports betting side. We'll also keep tracking altitude stuff, schedule stuff, things of that nature. Fantasy notes from yesterday. Not much in that Milwaukee-Detroit game. In fact, not much in any of these games, honestly. There were, Milwaukee-Detroit was largely a game without fantasy ramifications. I would argue that Utah-Houston was a game largely without fantasy ramifications. Philly-San Antonio didn't have anything going on. So what was that? Like half the card yesterday was just sort of not that interesting. But we'll blow through it here because I want to get to our chat with Anthony as soon as possible. And the only way to get there is to finish up on yesterday's stuff. By the way, I hope you guys like the gambling notes because I'm doing a lot more work on them lately. It's fun for me. I started betting a few of them myself, I'll admit, and I'm up a few units, so that's good too. Milwaukee, Detroit, the only note on this game that I wanted to bring up was Reggie Bullock going for 24 points. He goes on these hot streaks every once in a while, but he is very much a one-trick pony, and that's three-pointers. There's a reason he's number 170 in 9-cat leagues, and it's because he doesn't do anything else. He's a low-percentage guy. He doesn't shoot the ball well because most of his shots are from downtown. He'll make you about 2 threes a game on average, but it's not going to be like it was last night. So don't chase Reggie Bullock, please. It's not a thing. Phoenix, New York is a game I actually do want to come back to and pause on because there are a few things to talk about in that one. The quicker ones, we'll go through those and then we'll loop back around. Sacramento, Minnesota, don't care about the Sacramento side. They get blown out, so you can't draw too many conclusions from this one. For Minnesota, Taj Gibson came back and got the start and double-doubled in 22 minutes of this game. He actually had an hilarious sequence where he played defense with a shoe in his hand, a video that kind of went viral on the internet. Rob Covington played 35 minutes in this one for some reason. There was a brief moment where Sacramento went on a little run early in the second half. Maybe that's why Covington got bonus time. But it does tell me his knee is fine. If he's playing 36 minutes in a blowout and nobody else, I mean, this is Tom Thibodeau we're talking about, nobody else on the Wolves got more than 26 minutes and 44 seconds, and that was Andrew Wiggins. So, we're talking about a situation where you have to be pretty dang healthy to go 36 minutes in this ballgame, and that makes me feel better about whatever's going on with Rocco. The note really that I wanted to look at was Dario Saric and Taj Gibson. They ended up playing about the same number of minutes, but a lot of Dario's came in garbage time, which is a little bit unfortunate, and it means that pendulum might be swinging back towards Taj again. This is such a weird scenario. It seemed like it was going to be Gibson in sort of a longer term. Taj had 2 bad games in Golden State and in Sacramento, and he just sort of got run off the court by fast teams, and I was a little worried that might happen again against Sacramento, but he played much better in this one. They've got Detroit coming up. That's not a particularly fast team. San Antonio is not a fast team. Oklahoma City can get up and down a little bit, but Jeremy Grant is not a difficult guard at the 4. Chicago, not a traditional stretch 4 most times. There's some Markkanen at 4, some Portis, some Wendell Carter Jr. So that I think this is a stretcher for the Wolves where they can afford to go bigger again, which makes me think Taj Gibson is going to have a role over at least this next week or so, and then going forward we'll keep an eye on things. But it looks like he's pushed back out in front again. The back and forth is difficult. Let's be honest. The back and forth is difficult to track, but we're going to keep tracking it. And for now, I'd still far rather have Taj Gibson. I know that there are some sites out there that are saying, Dario's coming for his time. I'm not seeing it. I saw it for those 2 games, but for the most part, it's been Taj winning that minutes battle. I mean, it's been like a month since the trade went down now, and I think Taj has lost the minutes battle like 25% of the time, maybe a third at the most. I don't know that anybody's coming for his time. It's just closer to a time share than anything else. That sucks even more. Chicago got blown out by Oklahoma City, so I'm not going to worry too much about the results of this game. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle. Yes, I used kerfuffle on a podcast. Chris Dunn had 12 and 7, Markkanen 16 and 15, and old Cameron Payne at 11 and 6. We don't know what the hell's going on with Zach LaVine. Did an interview with Jacob Bickshorn of Bloggable as well. That'll air likely in a couple of days on this show, where he basically said, look for this to be a couple weeks and then keep an eye on it, and hopefully it's not any longer than that. I think there was a sprain involved I saw in one report, but the Bulls, poor Bulls, they can't have all their nice things at the same time. They're still not going to be good, but they'll be better than they have been. Nothing interesting on the Oklahoma City side. Utah-Houston, as I mentioned, there's no fantasy notes in this one. Not a thing. Not one thing. Jay Crowder got more minutes than that could have been expected against a team like Houston that plays, PJ Tucker at the power forward spot. But otherwise, nothing. Philly, San Antonio, nothing. Blowout game. Memphis, Golden State, also kind of nothing. I mean, we were keeping an eye on the minutes for guys like JJJ and JaMychal Green, and they were not that great. But this game was also nearing blowout, and so they kind of went with a bench run in the fourth quarter. So Marc Gasol never got back in towards the end of the game. It was a lot of Omri Caspi at that point. I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from the minutes in this one, but I admit, a little bit concerned about, Joakim Noah played actually relatively well in his 14 minutes on the floor, which is disconcerting, and it's a team that doesn't want to score a bunch of points. They want it to be a lower scoring game, so when there isn't a whole bunch of stuff to go around, well, it gets you in a weird spot. I'm still holding all of those guys. When I say those guys, I mean like Slow-Mo, Green, Jaren Jackson, just to see how this thing kind of shakes itself out. It's probably a buy low on a guy like Marc Gasol. It's probably a buy low on Jaren Jackson Jr., frankly, because that line is about as bad as it gets. But I don't know that he ever gets back up to that top 30 run that he was putting together when there was no competition for minutes. That was no Joakim Noah. That was no JaMychal Green. And now there are two other guys that he could legitimately lose minutes to. It's just, that's a math thing. Clippers and Blazers and Knicks and Suns are the two games that I wanted to give a little bit more run to on today's podcast, because I think those were kind of the games from yesterday where you could actually glean a little bit of something. And so we'll start with the late one, because that one was the simpler one to me. Clippers made a game of it against Portland. They were down a bunch in this one, but they fought their way back. I think I mentioned on yesterday's podcast, the Clippers have been in a horrible scheduling spot. Just horrible. Like, they haven't... Go to the Clippers' schedule, pull up the game log for one of their guys that's actually been healthy for the whole stretch. They haven't had multiple games in the same city since November 10th through the 15th. That's the note that I wanted to repeat. So they traveled, and they had a couple of days where there were 2 days between basketball games. But I don't think they had any days where there were 3 days, any games, I should say, where there were 3 days between games. 2 was the max. They had a little bit of a stretch in there, November 20th, where they had a little bit of rest. 2 days off. I don't know why I can't say that. After their loss in Washington, and they beat Memphis. Then they went up and they won in Portland, and then they had 2 days off, and they beat Phoenix. And then they went to Sacramento, and they won, and that's when things really started to get tough. They had 2 days off, and they lost in Dallas. Then they had a back-to-back in New Orleans that they barely won. They had a day off, lost in Memphis. 2 days off, lost to Miami. 1 day off, overtime win over Phoenix. Back-to-back, lost to Toronto. Traveled to San Antonio, lost. Traveled to Oklahoma City, lost. Traveled home to Portland, lost. And now they finally have a rest. It's a weird phenomenon. They have 2 days off, and then they have Dallas at home, a team that they lost to in Dallas, 114-110 on December 2nd. You thinking what I'm thinking? Oh, yes. So I think we'll see some bounce backs for this team. Started to see it in this ballgame, in fact. It looked like they started to wake up a little bit, just a little, if nothing else, just kind of happy to be home. Tobias Harris at 39 and 11. Good to see him get going. Patrick Beverley played well. He actually had a double-double in this game. Avery Bradley, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Sorry, I don't know why I didn't lead with this, so we'll come back to it. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 24 points in this ballgame, but he's still, like, the other stuff, man. Where's the other stuff? Just not that thrilled with it. Montrez got ejected, but he was on his way to actually having a slightly better performance as well. And Gallo had 22 points, but it took him 16 shots to get there. The line of the night comes from Avery Bradley, who played 30 minutes in this game, and his line was 1 rebound and 1 turnover. That's got to be like a record low for... It's not usage rate, because... he took 4 shots and missed all of them. It's not like he took 0 shots. He just did 0 things. He did nothing. You can't. That's magical, man. I'm going to tweet about it because this is the craziest thing. 30 minutes. He played 30 minutes in this game. So I wonder if we'll see more Patrick Beverley and Shai on the floor together and play Gilgeous-Alexander at the 2. I mean, Beverley is short to be a shooting guard, but he's certainly tough enough. Maybe that's what we see going forward. You guys know how much I love Pat Beverley. The question is, can he be out there in a spot where he can sort of do enough to be relevant? All of this, of course, contingent on Lou Williams being out for about another week, so it may end up being a streaming situation. But you're looking at a Clippers team that is going to start to play a little bit better just because they're going to start to get a little bit of rest. The Portland side, we were watching Mo Harkless, who also played 30 minutes in this game, but didn't finish the game. That's worth noting. Was it because he had 5 fouls? Maybe. We'll find out in the next one, because I don't think anybody's picking him up yet. He's a free agent in all of my money leagues, every single one of them. And admittedly, they go about as deep as playing like a 14-teamer. That's about as deep as my leagues run. So I get it. But I'm also a little bit surprised that nobody's noticed this yet. And it's because he's a 0 scoring type of guy. But remember, he had that one rest day. But 3 of his last 4 games, he's played 31, 27, and 30 minutes. If he's playing 30 minutes, he has... I feel like I need to name it. I'm going to call it the Marvin Williams theory. If he plays 30 minutes, he's a great 9-cat dude because he's going to hit a 3, steal, and block a shot. Give him 30 minutes, he's going to get you 3 of those cash counters, at least, usually. He's going to average probably 1, 1, and 1. He's not going to do much else. If he plays 30 minutes, he's going to get you 4 rebounds, 1.5 assists, and 8 to 10 points. So it's not going to be pretty, and it's probably going to be about half a turnover a game, which is where a lot of the value is going to sit. But one of the things that he does that some of these other 3-and-D type quiet 9-cat guys don't do is he actually hits his shots at a high clip. Not all of his shots are 3-pointers. The 3s he takes are generally wide open and high percentage. Last year he shot 42% from downtown. He's a decent foul shooter lately, not early in his career, so don't go all the way back to the beginning, and he never takes any free throws anyway, so it sort of doesn't matter. But he has the potential, again, in 30 minutes, to be a 1, 1, and 1 guy, and there's a world here where he could get up to 28, 29 minutes, then he's a top 100 9-cat dude, and fits a spot on, say, a team that has some turnover-prone guys. So that's why we're watching Mo Harkless. He's a much more interesting fantasy guy than people give him credit for. He's in that Danny Green, PJ Tucker, Marvin Williams, old man vein. He's not as old as some of those guys, born in 93, so he's only 25 at this point. But he plays like those guys. So I might start calling him Old Man Mo. Old Man Marv, Old Man Mo. We got some OMMs on the board. Old Man Danny, Old Man PJ. We're racking them up here. Got Old Man Thad. Very different kind of player, but this is who we're watching. I love these low turnover guys that get overlooked in 9-category leagues, and people are like, well, their value is just great because they're low turnover. Yeah, well, you know what? Turnovers count. You get points in your 9-cat leagues based on that category. I built a team that I think can win turnovers every week and still be really good in one of my leagues. It's doable. People say, oh, it's impossible. If you have a good team, they're going to make a ton of turnovers. Not necessarily. Get efficient guys. I mean, Kawhi Leonard, he's incredible, and he doesn't turn the ball over. I don't know how I got off on this rant. Let's talk about Phoenix, New York. That was the other game that I wanted to dedicate a few minutes to. The New York side, because to me this is the slightly easier of the two. Emmanuel Mudiay seems to have won the point guard job, and he had a big game with 32, 6, and 6, and 2 3-pointers, but there's always the same cloud hanging over Mudiay. As well as he plays, he has a really difficult time being a 9-category fantasy-relevant guy because his other stuff is not very good, and he doesn't shoot the ball that well. He's way over his career mark at this point in almost every category, but the one that jumps out the most, and, you could argue that some of it is because he's finally playing minutes again for the first time in 2.5 years, but look back at those early seasons. A lot of the stuff is right in line with what you'd expect from Mudiay playing 25 to 30 minutes a game. About 1 steal, because he's not a big-time steals guy. About half a block, because he is sort of an adequately sized point guard at 6'5". He's sort of big. He'll average probably around 4 to 5 assists if he's playing that number of minutes. He's going to average around 3 to 3.5 rebounds. All that stuff is right around his career per 36s. The number that's way off is 47% shooting. He's a career 38.5%er, and that's with this year included. So he was lower than that prior to the 25 games he's played for New York this season. Can Mudiay really go from being a 38%er to a 47%er overnight? Over a summer? Probably not. So for me, there's an expectation of regression here at some point. It's why I like him much more as a points league guy, because I don't think he's going to shoot 47% for the year. I just don't. His turnovers are always going to be relatively high. The three-pointers are not going to be that high. That's not part of his game, which I guess is fine, because if you're going to shoot poorly, please get closer to the rim. And so it ends up being a lot of points. Points league. And that's how we get to that one. Kevin Knox, likewise, low percentage, lot of shots, not much besides scoring. Yesterday, a good example of that. 17 points, 5 rebounds in 37 minutes, 2 3-pointers, 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks. Only 1 turnover, so that's good. But he's got points league written all over him, too. The reason I like a lot of this stuff, and by the way, Noah Vonleh, foul trouble early, and then New York just got blitzed in the second half, so if you want to explain away that one. Also, no Tim Hardaway Jr. in this game, so a ton of shots for guys like Mudiay and Knox, and Hazonia took 11 shots, and Ntilikina took 11 shots. Anyway, some of this box score is a little bit screwy because Hardaway and Trier and Dotson and even Mitchell Robinson were out, but worth noting that Trey Burke did get 24 minutes anyway, and Mudiay still had a good points league game. Courtney Lee played 22 minutes, and all that really did was create a bigger logjam on the wings, as if New York needed that in the mix. So I still trust Cantor. I still trust Tim Hardaway. I still trust Vonleh, despite the low minutes in this one. I think he'll bounce back, and we saw him play better in the last couple of ball games, so I'm not writing him off yet. Lance Thomas, he played. That's the kind of blowout we were looking at in the second half of this ball game. But, from the Mudiay, Kevin Knox standpoint, to me, I think they're more of a format-specific kind of use in fantasy. The Phoenix side. Okay, we got news yesterday after the podcast was put out that Austin Rivers is going to be waived by the Phoenix Suns, basically as soon as the trade is officially processed and everybody is on their new team. That does change things a little bit, but not enough for me. I saw Twitter was still sort of, the argument continues, and it's a good one to have, by the way. I think it's a really good argument, and I think there are good cases to be made on both sides, and the guys that we're going to bring up are the fringy ones. The main cogs are fine. TJ Warren's good, Devin Booker's good, DeAndre Ayton is good, Rashawn Holmes is locked in. He played 19 minutes yesterday as well. If he doesn't get into foul trouble in the first half, he might even got to 20 or 21. So those guys are fine. Rashawn Holmes, by the way, man, so much fun right now. The fringy guys are Josh Jackson, Mikal Bridges, DeAnthony Melton, and newly acquired Kelly Oubre Jr. DeAnthony Melton is arguably the only true point guard on the roster, and yet he still only played 20 minutes yesterday. 21, if you want to round up. And that's because the other 26 and change minutes at point guard went to Jamal Crawford, who had 14 assists in yesterday's game. DeAnthony Melton, I'm going to say it again. DeAnthony Melton got outplayed at point guard by a 20-year, sixth-man scoring guard playing point guard. That augurs poorly. Why didn't Phoenix keep Austin Rivers? Well, they said he'd be better off chasing a contender as an NBA veteran. Is Austin Rivers really considered an NBA veteran at this point? I guess so. He's been around for a little bit. But what's he? He's like 25 too, isn't he? He's 26. That's stupid. Oy, 26-year-olds are veterans. That's soul-crushing. So anyway, he's off the radar. You can drop him. I don't care where he ends up. The best-case scenario was probably staying in Phoenix. They believe, Phoenix, that they can piecemeal this point guard thing together with Devin Booker at point guard for stretches, Jamal Crawford and Devin Booker as the backcourt, and DeAnthony Melton for apparently about half the ballgame. So I'm out. I am not someone who's going to sit on Melton to see how this goes. When he was in the game, he only had a usage rate of 10. That's the real problem with this team, is you have to be so laser focused on doing stuff with the basketball, because heaven help you, if you pass that thing away, it's probably not coming back. Jamal Crawford had 14 assists. The Suns as a team had 27, which, by the way, is not a bad number, but it tells you that the other 11 dudes who played yesterday each averaged about 1. And as it turns out, that's basically what they had. TJ Warren had 1. Devin Booker had 2. Josh Jackson set the non-Jamal Crawford team high with 3. Effectively, what I'm saying is, with Warren locked into 35 minutes a game or more, and Booker locked into 35 minutes a game or more, and DeAndre Ayton and Rashawn Holmes taking up all of the center minutes, and, by the way, they played together for about 3 minutes yesterday, which was glorious. You're talking about now the point guard and the small forward and the power forward. Those spots are still open. That's a decent amount of playing time. But what they did, and again, we're adding another body in Kelly Oubre, is Josh Jackson played 26, Jamal Crawford 26, Bridges 33, Melton 21. Nobody separated them. Bridges was the closest, right? He had 33 minutes, but he had a usage rate of 9. And Kelly Oubre is coming to town to, punch into his and Josh Jackson's minutes. You're looking at, listen, you could argue TJ Warren is the power forward. I don't care. Put him at power forward and call the new guys the small forwards. Devin Booker is locked in as the shooting guard, no question. Meaning that the point guard job is basically going to be split between Melton and Crawford. And even if they see all those minutes, because you could slide down Booker to the point guard and play Josh Jackson or Kelly Oubre at the 2. Bridges at the 3, Warren at the 4. So there's no guarantee for me that DeAnthony Melton's going to do enough to be held. I don't think Jamal Crawford is worth owning. I never said he was, and I'm not going to change that opinion now. And then you're looking at Bridges, Jackson, and Oubre all fighting for whatever's left at small forward and power forward. Not even power forward, because you got TJ Warren there. So whatever's left is small forward. You basically have 2 positions worth of minutes available, plus a smattering of backup minutes for Warren and Booker. So 96 plus Warren and Booker's backup minutes, which yesterday, by the way, was a total of 20. So 116 minutes split between Jackson, Crawford, Bridges, Melton, and Oubre. That's 5 guys. 110. What did I say? Roughly 110 minutes? 115? That averages out to 23 minutes a person. That's not enough. The only hope here is that Kelly Oubre can win the starter's job at small forward and push Bridges and push Jackson aside. But I don't know that that's happening. I think there's going to be a hot hand thing that goes on here. And so for that reason, I'm not really squatting on any of these guys unless I already have them. If I already had one of these dudes and it's all right, at this point, I'll just wait 2 games and see what happens. But I'm certainly not dropping anybody to pick them up. And that is where we stand with the Phoenix Suns, and obviously we'll know more come their next ball game, which will luckily be just a couple days from now. Only other news that we got over the last day or so is that Karis LeVert apparently looks decent and could potentially come back by January. You could probably stash him in the next week or so. Al Horford and Niko Mirotic are out tomorrow, so you can also make adjustments for that. It sounds like Julius Randle might also be out tomorrow, so maybe there's a streaming option in New Orleans, because tomorrow is our DFS contest. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And Goran Dragic apparently is not out for the year. That's like the only other update that came out over the last 24 hours. I wanted to briefly mention again that DFS contest because about 30 of you asked me to get on the DFS mailing list. And if you'd like to do that, please let me know. You can let me know on Twitter on that as well. I'm going to send an alert out basically anytime we open up a new contest. Yes, the contests are going to be every Wednesday, but there's going to come a time, and it happened when the contest was only 50 people, that you had to get in before the last minute. Now that it's 100, you can probably wait until tomorrow if you really wanted to, but this is just going to be an email that basically has the link to the contest. That's it. It's going to be like, hey, Hoopball opened up a DFS contest. Here's the link. So that way you can join it. You can let me know about that on Twitter as well, at Dan Besbris. Enough waiting. I have made you all wait long enough. Let's talk to our guest. This is a return guest, but in podcast network, I guess, is how we'd have to frame that. The gentleman here was on our Lakers show, and now I decided to drag him over into the weird world of fantasy sports and bug him about Lakers rotations and timeshares and who the heck is going to actually get to touch the basketball besides the main crew, the great Anthony Irwin. Welcome back to the show, my man.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for dragging me over to the world of fantasy.
Well, yeah, don't thank me yet. At Anthony Irwin LA, if you want to follow him on Twitter, and you should. He is the host of Locked On Lakers and the Silver Screen and Roll podcast channel. What's the latest over there? Give me an update on what you guys got going on before I start bugging you about the Lakers.
Oh, it's just we set up a podcast channel for the various writers and hosts across our little platform over there, and Harrison and I host the Tuesday afternoon shows, and then we have different hosts for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So we're still building it up, but it's been a lot of fun to get back to building something up from the ground up.
Excellent. That sounds wonderful. You know, I love a good daily podcast.
Yeah.
Hint, hint, nod, nod. So, jumping into Lakers stuff, I guess we'll start with the rumor mill and work our way back to the guys that are actually already wearing Lakers jerseys. Trevor Ariza is now a member of the Washington Wizards. That one's off the table. What have you heard, if anything, about anybody else that the Lakers might be targeting to try to round out the roster a little bit?
We haven't really heard anything about targets specifically, like specific players, but what we're starting to kind of get a good feel for is the type of player the Lakers are interested in. They want a longer wing who can step in and spare Brandon Ingram as the primary perimeter defender, and also step out and hit shots. And KCP has been kind of the name that's been thrown around. He has a really movable contract. He is looking for a little bit bigger role somewhere else, it seems like. But Ariza made a lot of sense, and apparently Ariza wanted to be a Laker. It just didn't work out because Robert Sarver was more interested in spiting the Lakers than taking the better deal.
He was still a little upset about Tyson Chandler coming to town, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
Robert Sarver is a beloved NBA figure. I don't know how you could slander him.
Yeah. If you were to ask around in any NBA circle, who's the best guy that we could talk to right now? It's Robert Sarver's coming up in at least the 300 range.
Yeah, he's a top 300 play there. Okay, so the guys that are actually on the team. One thing that I've been trying to figure out, and this is more the fantasy standpoint, but also a little bit on the reality side, is who is the Lakers' actual shooting guard on this team? Is it Ingram sometimes? Is it KCP? Is it Josh Hart? Is anybody actually going to sort of rise above in that crew and grab the job, or is it going to be, Ingram gets slid around to sort of whatever position on the floor he can be used in because, he's a pterodactyl and he's playing basketball? So I guess it really more comes down to Josh Hart and KCP. Is either one of these guys actually going to clear themselves of the other one?
Josh Hart just had his opportunity to, and he didn't really make good on it. He had almost all of NBA or Lakers Twitter pulling for him to do so because he seems to make a lot of sense in that 2 spot in the starting lineup, and you slide Brandon Ingram over to the bench and you give him all the touches over there. But Hart didn't really do much. So I think when Brandon Ingram comes back, Luke Walton will once again put Ingram in that starting shooting guard spot. And the one hope here is that Ingram watched Kuzma and the way that Kuzma found success and starts to kind of emulate some of that. That's the one hope here that can kind of bring Ariza back from the perils of not being able to fit alongside LeBron James, is if he just kind of realizes, okay, I can't take 6 dribbles per possession here, and learns to fit alongside LeBron. Maybe he works out a little bit better as a shooting guard.
So how could that happen, I guess? I know it's a hard kind of existential question, but how could his game evolve in a way that could exist alongside LeBron James?
Well, it all starts before he catches the ball. He does this really weird thing. He's almost completely reliant on isolation scores at this point. He is, I believe, he passed LeBron as the player whose shot attempts or makes are least assisted. The percentage of his makes are the least assisted. And that makes him a really inefficient player. And so I think what he needs to learn to do is put himself in better situations off the ball, not even just in terms of spots on the floor, but if you watch him play, he kind of slacks up. His hands go down to his sides, and he just kind of stands there vertically waiting for his next isolation possession. And I think what he needs to learn to do is put himself into better spots, because he was a decent, it wasn't on a ton of quality or quantity last year, but he was a decent spot up 3-point shooter last year. And this year is just non-existent. And I think if he was to get back to that, and it all starts before he catches the ball.
He looks like a guy that should be better at slashing. Why is that not a bigger part of his game? I mean, it seems like he should be able to just catch the ball like 95 feet in the air and take it right to the rim. Why isn't that a thing?
They've been using Kyle Kuzma as more of their primary cutter, which is
right.
It's weird that you have a primary cutter, but I guess you can only have so many possessions when you have LeBron on the team where a play is designed for somebody else's off-ball movement. But I kind of feel like that's a little backwards, because Kuzma is a willing catch-and-shoot threat. He is perfectly fine putting himself in the right situations out there, going to the right spots on the floor, and then having himself be ready for the catch-and-shoot, whereas Ingram doesn't. So that's another thing that I'd like to see Walton kind of tweak around in terms of the team's approach to offense is let's get Brandon Ingram on the move a little bit more. And it was kind of a bummer right before Ingram got hurt. He was doing a little bit more of that, and his game was kind of sort of starting to come around a little bit. So maybe that was a preview of things to come. I guess that's what we can hope for.
So back to KCP for a little bit. He's the name we've heard in trade rumors the most. Is he still the team? Is it just because he's the easiest piece to move? Is he because he's superfluous? Why is that the case?
It's his contract, first and foremost. A lot of the guys that the Lakers might be targeting are veterans and they're veteran wings. Trevor Ariza is making $15 million this year, so you needed quite a bit of salary ballast. I believe KCP is in that $10 to $12 million range. He also has a trade kicker, which tells me he was kind of getting himself ready to be traded this year. He entered the season kind of thinking that might be a direction that the season goes in. He does, though, have a no-trade clause because he re-signed on a one-year deal. And so that might complicate some things. It means that he can pick, like if KCP gets moved, his trade value will probably go up because he'll be able to handpick which situation he's going to.
Okay. Interesting. So looking at it from more of a, I want to say like a macro perspective, but maybe that's not the right terminology here. Mm-hmm. If he is moved, I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this question. Is there a way to get back the right piece? I mean, is there a world where the Lakers are looking for just a guy? Is there a world where they're looking for a collection of picks that could be used in a future trade? There's so many ideas bouncing around in my head, and I know I'm making this a little bit less fantasy and a little more Lakers for a minute here, but There's the whole Clutch Sports connection. Like, could you pile up picks and move in that direction? How many of these crazy, far-fetched things that are bouncing around on NBA Twitter are actually achievable in any way? There's the question I was trying to get at. How much of this is real?
We're on a fantasy podcast, so...
That's true. Very little. Very little.
But I think so. I think what it comes down to is you got to look at the type of players the Lakers are looking at. I talked about wings and stuff, and then they also the whichever player they trade for can't have money beyond this season. So if you see any hypothetical fantasy trade out there that involves the Lakers taking on money beyond the season, that's not going to happen. Even if it's like partially guaranteed money, they can't take on any money whatsoever if they want to get in a room with Kevin Durant, which is something that they really seem to think that they'll be able to do. Get in the room, maybe not sign him, but that's one thing. The picks thing is interesting. I just don't know how many teams are lining up to offer picks of any kind of real value for a couple months of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So I don't know if that's really going to happen, but it's mostly a guy. It's mostly like I threw out if the Spurs can kind of get off of their we will never trade with the Lakers kind of deal. I think Rudy Gay makes a ton of sense for the Lakers. If the Spurs kind of fall by the wayside here and they fall out of playoff contention, Rudy Gay is a longer wing. He's shooting really well from 3-point range this year. He turns into a Hall of Famer every time he plays against the Lakers. So Magic Johnson was watching those two games. That seems to make a lot of sense. That kind of player, just a longer wing who can defend multiple positions, preferably perimeter defenders. That's where Rudy Gay doesn't really make as much sense. But that's kind of what you're and it's really specific. And I guess the point here is to say that there's no guarantee a trade is made here, given how specific of a need that the Lakers have there. Trevor Ariza checked all those boxes, and they apparently had a deal pretty close to working out. But Sarver stepped in at the last second and said that he wanted to overpay Kelly Oubre this summer.
They have to want him, right? Like, there's no other reason to make that trade because they didn't get. Then they're waiving Austin Rivers, but anyway, that's a discussion.
The way that they approached that entire situation didn't make much sense to me.
Classic Robert Sarver. Rajon Rondo, due back in the not too distant future. There was bad news, there was good news. Now it seems like everything is sort of calmed a little bit. What is his role when he gets back from this hand injury?
Well, that's kind of the $100 million question around people who pay attention to this team. Is before he went down, Luke Walton was still pretty hesitant to put Lonzo Ball in clutch moments. Even right after Rajon Rondo got hurt, there were a couple games where Lonzo wasn't in when the game was on the line late in the fourth quarter. And so whether Luke kind of reverts back to those habits with Rondo, you also know that there's some politics here going on. So has Lonzo shown enough to LeBron James that he belongs in those spots over the veteran Rondo? The front office really loves Rondo, so you don't know how much they might be kind of pushing Luke in a direction of, hey, we really need to win these games. We don't have time to experiment with what Lonzo might be capable of. So I still think Lonzo has shown enough. He's gotten one thing that I was really paying attention to was his defensive rating over the course of as he gets healthier. Remember, he didn't have a training camp. He really didn't have much of an offseason because of that surgery that he had when he was thrown into trade rumors. And so he comes into the season out of shape and not really ready to. He had a minutes restriction, and his defensive rating every single month has gone down noticeably from October to November, and then from November to December, it's gone down another couple points here. So
when you say gone down, you mean actually gotten better, right?
Gotten better, yes, okay. Yeah. So the number of points that teams are scoring against the Lakers has gone down when he's on the court. So it tells me that he's getting healthier, and I think hopefully the Lakers have been able to notice that trend as well, and Lonzo has earned at least the opportunity to to prove himself. And if he doesn't, then Rondo goes in and plays the same role that he had to start the season.
I'm surprised at how many people are still so down on Lonzo Ball. I know his shot doesn't pass the eye test, but everything else he does seems like he's about a half beat quicker than most other people on the NBA court. Am I crazy in seeing that?
No, I don't. I think the best way to describe Lonzo Ball is the things that he does well, he does really, really well. The things that he does really poorly are the kinds of things that casual fans look for, and he does them really, really poorly. So like you notice when he shoots a ball, he's like, wow, that's not right. I don't know what went into that shot. Or when he's driving to the basket, whoa, what just happened there, right? And those are the things when he's on the ball, casual fans are watching for, and people grade him based on what they see in those moments. When you're not watching him, when he's off ball on defense, for example, like who watches Lonzo Ball, who watches an NBA game and actually watches how Lonzo Ball makes rotations on the defensive side? How many guys are watching Lonzo off ball on offense, putting himself in a situation where he can help the player who has the ball get that hockey assist with a quick read and instinctual pass? Like those are things that you aren't typically watching for. And those are all things that come into play with instincts, and it takes a lot. Like a lot of times, it takes multiple viewings of the same game to really kind of understand what you're watching when he's out there playing well.
Two more questions for you, and then I'll let you get back to your day. Still on the Lonzo Rondo front, do you think then that he's shown enough to sort of hold the 28-plus minute role going forward, or is it going to be more of a night-to-night thing where there are some nights where Rondo's running the offense and the team just looks a little bit more fluid, even though the defensive gap between the two guys is sort of, not even really worth mentioning. Rondo's a little bit on the older side. Is it going to be kind of a back and forth thing still?
I think so, at least for a little while. I think right when Rajon Rondo comes back, it's probably going to be, I guess Lonzo has been playing about 28 minutes with Rondo out. I think he'll drop down to the 25-ish. Like if you were to average it out, he would drop down to the 25-ish minute range. And on any given night, you don't really know if he'll be getting those late game minutes. And it'll be frustrating at first. I still wouldn't sell on Lonzo if we were just talking about fantasy and how to manage a team. I still wouldn't trade Lonzo because he seems to be picking up some type of chemistry with LeBron. And if there's a way that you want somebody to get opportunities, and then the best way to make good on those opportunities, it's to figure it out alongside LeBron James on a LeBron James team. So I think there's still long-term value there. It's just going to be a little frustrating in the short term.
Yeah, how good has Kuzma looked alongside Bron lately? That's crazy.
Been great.
Wow, that's been something else. That wasn't even going to be the question, but he's been amazing as a pairing. And that was the one that always seemed like it was a good fit, even right out of the chute. But the last question I have for you, Anthony, is, and I've tried to do this myself, and I found it to be an achievable goal, but I got to know, why are free throws so hard?
Well, so one thing I found out this season that's been kind of mind-boggling to me is the Lakers don't have a shooting coach.
Really?
Yeah, I found that out over the course of the season, and I'm in utter shock at it. I've never heard of that. You have a team that is a multi-billion-dollar entity, one of the biggest sports brands in across all of professional sport, across the world even, and this thing that is not it's not cap restricted. You could hire literal Dumbledore if he was a great shooting coach for all of the money, and yet they don't employ one. So I don't know how much that maybe has to do with their shooting woes. Free throws are almost all mental. Like they're the kind of thing that you can do with nothing but muscle memory. So if you get in your own head or you practice the wrong habit for long enough, then you're kind of sort of screwed. So I honestly, it's baffling. This is the second or third straight season where the Lakers don't have anybody on their team that you would point to specifically and say, that guy will never be able to shoot. Even Lonzo, like there are aspects of his shot that like kind of sort of make sense to me. His release is fairly clean. His backspin is fairly clean. They don't have a Shaq. They don't have a DeAndre Jordan before the season, and yet they're awful at free throws. It's wild.
Maybe they all have the same mysterious shoulder ailment that Markelle Fultz has.
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
But I kid. The great Anthony Irwin. Thank you so much, my man. I really appreciate you carving out time for us.
Of course. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well. He is Anthony Irwin. He is the host of Locked On Lakers and the Silver Screen and Roll podcast channel. Is it brand new or fairly new? Fairly new, right?
I call it. I don't know. It's right on the border. We've been doing it for a couple months now.
All right, we're going brand new. At Anthony Irwin LA. Give him a follow. He'll be tagged, of course, on this podcast going out as well. One more time, Anthony. Thanks, my man.
Thank you.
That dude is the best. That dude is the best. I'm going to bug him again to come back on. I don't even need something to happen to the Lakers. It's just fun to talk to. It's nice to have guests that are just fun. Tonight in the NBA, a short card. You guys know I actually kind of like the short cards, right? Because it gives us a little bit of a respite. Cleveland is in Indiana. Yikes. Cleveland's terrible. They really are. They're just awful right now. I'm not touching anything out there except maybe Larry Nance. Indiana, Tyreek Evans' knee acting up. Sounds like he might miss this one, which is great for Darren Collison owners because he's definitely chipping into his functional ability. And maybe this will be the start of kind of trying to phase somebody out. Although, why would they? Indiana's actually been playing pretty well lately, and if it ain't broke. Washington is at Atlanta. This is, believe it or not, a revenge game for the Hawks, but this is one of those caveats where, and I said it on VSiN this morning with my buddy Gil Alexander, if you care more about your bet than the team does about winning the game, it's probably not that great of a bet. So, thinking about it, this opened Washington as a 5-point favorite, and it's down to Washington by 2.5. So even if you liked Atlanta, the fact that you've lost 2.5 points of value, pretty tough to still bet on that same side. But Atlanta or anything for me in this one. Lakers 2-point road favorites at Brooklyn. That's a relatively fair line. Brooklyn's been playing well. Lakers are going to be looking to bounce back off that loss in Washington. All right, fine. I will watch Rondé Hollis-Jefferson. I'll do it. Fine, I will do it. Is Trevor Ariza making his debut tonight? I don't know if we have confirmation on that yet, but that'd obviously be something to watch in Washington. Atlanta, watch Kevin Huerter. He's been a little bit down after a couple of good games. You know me, I don't think he's going to be a difference maker this year, so I'm not jumping to go get him, but somebody to keep an eye on. And then Dallas and Denver. This is a game where we've seen Denver sort of overperform with their short roster. Is this the one where they suffer a little bit of a letdown? I don't care. Not touching all of these streamable fill-ins. This is, by all accounts, a relatively uninteresting day from a fantasy standpoint. But again, you watch Rondé, you watch Huerter, watch Ariza with his new team. It's not much, so no homework assignments tonight. We'll make life easy on you. No homework! That's right. Throw your papers in the air, throw your pencils sky high, and race out of school. It's a good day. Atlanta is, again, the side we're going to be watching, but I don't think I'm making any wagers today. That too much value lost on that play to still bet. I mean, if you lose 2.5 points on the side that you wanted, man, 2.5 points, that's your window. That's your value play. Now it's not a value play anymore. Washington probably is about 5 points better than Atlanta on a neutral court because Atlanta's terrible. Washington's not 8 points better. That's what the line told us at opening. 8-point neutral site, 5-point favorite in Atlanta. But now that it's down to 2.5, yeah, that's gone, man. That's gone. So, not a whole lot there, unfortunately. Luckily, the NBA will come bop ups in the face tomorrow because Wednesday is huge. 12? Yeah, 12-game Wednesday coming up. That's going to be a tough DFS card to build. But luckily, we will have Mike Apatria on the show tomorrow to walk us through the giant Wednesday card and get you set for that Beat the Expert competition. Thursday, Christian Villery, Hoopball's Christian Villery, the host of the Hoopball Sacramento Kings podcast over at Hoopball Kings, will come on and tell us about the Kings' success so far. We'll talk about Bielitsa. We'll talk about Bagley. We'll talk about Iman Shumpert. We'll try to isolate some fantasy value outside of the core cogs. on the Sacramento Kings roster. Thanks again to Anthony Irwin at Anthony Irwin LA. Follow him. Do it. I'm at Dan Besbris. Again, let me know if you want to try to work for Hoopball or if you want to get on that DFS mailing list at Hoopball Fantasy, at Hoopball Tweets if you want to get all that other information as well. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.